So some of the other considerations that you need to think about when you're looking at purchasing or researching a human resource system, obviously the major constraint would be budget. And that's really going to depend on your organisational size. So obviously the smaller organisations have less of a budget than the 10,000 plus organisations. The cloud-based services now do offer options, and for smaller organisations, say 50 and below, there are actually off-the-shelf systems that you can buy. One example is Sage software. Now, Sage has been known for years as a financial tool for accountants and small businesses for doing their accounting packages. But I think it was 5 years ago now, in fact, no, it must have been more than that, 8 years ago, Sage actually purchased a software vendor's product, and that product was called a Snowdrop, which is quite a cute name for a software system. But Snowdrop were very large in the UK in HR and absence management. They were bought out by Sage, and that is now included. Obviously, it's an extra cost on the license because it's an optional module, but Sage also do customer relationship management software. So even what was traditionally a financially based vendor has started to move into other areas. So there are options available. I've actually seen in the past as well, one company that were very, very inventive, I think is probably the best way to put it, and they actually even used Microsoft Outlook as their recruiting system. So just because you may have a tight budget or a restrained budget for a smaller organisation, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't implement some type of system. A lot of the more traditional, straightforward record keeping, who's been off when, how many days vacation have you have. Some of you probably might not have been around long enough to know that we used to use big legal size cards, and they were all split up into little calendar days, and used to put an S if somebody was off sick, or a V for vacation, F for flex. Well, you can even do that on a spreadsheet. So if you're creative and you understand basic systems that are available to you through everyday vendors like Microsoft or even Mac, some of their products will do the same thing, you can do that. I mentioned about mobile earlier on, and this isn't necessarily specific to HR software being on a mobile platform, but with the advent now of people, more and more the workforce are using tablets or mobile phones, but certainly tablet users. If you go into a small organisation today, for example, a chiropractor, most chiropractors now are using a tablet to do their appointment booking, their record keeping, their accounts processing, their sending receipts to the client. And because it's becoming so commonplace for people to be using tablets, there are a lot more smaller packages that include an aspect of HR and even payroll that you can use even on an iPad or a Windows tablet. So there are more options available, which is good news. Obviously, you wouldn't have some of the bells and whistles that you get on the bigger applications, but at least there's something available for everybody. I just wanted to touch on I mentioned several software vendors earlier on, but there are really mid-market and big market or large market vendors. Those with a mid-market focus, and if you're looking at the smaller applications, you may want to research some of these. Just go to their home site and see what they are offering. So Halogen, Ultimate Software and ADP actually, they focus on the mid-market. The larger market, if you want to see what other enhanced features are available with a higher priced system, those vendors are obviously SAP, Oracle, Workday, but those would be cost prohibitive for organisations. I would estimate probably an organisation with 1,000 or less employees, they're not going to have the level of IT support to even look at those organisations. But they're great to look at to see what functionality is available. Okay. One of the other areas I wanted to touch on, and I'm actually going to read a statement to you to make sure that I relay it accurately. I spoke about concerns around security and privacy of data, particularly for software as a service. In BC, there's the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, which is, you'll hear people refer to it as FIPPA, F-I-P-P-A, and the equivalent acronym in Alberta, for example, and in a couple of other provinces is FOIP, which is F-O-I-P-P. Even though the acronyms are different, they're both referring to the same act. What that act specifically states is that a public body must ensure that personal information in its custody or in its control is stored only in Canada and accessed only in Canada, unless very specific conditions are met. And there is a great big long list of conditions, so I'll provide you with the link so that you can check out a little bit more information on the Act itself, but those conditions are very strict, and it's unlikely that if you're working with a public body anytime that hosting data in another country is going to meet the requirements of the Act. So that's one thing to be very aware of. Obviously, there are, outside of public bodies, there is always concern over data security, so where it's hosted. And recently in the media, for example, somebody like, even a corporation like Sony, people can hack the data. So you have to make sure that if you're hosting on site, or even if you're going with a cloud-based solution, that vendor or your internal servers are really, really secure. It doesn't take much nowadays for some of these really clever IT people to, the hackers to get in and actually get hold of the data. It's a shame, really. It's a bit of a waste of talent, because if they applied that into the workplace, then I think we'd have some marvellous opportunities. One of the other things I wanted to just raise as a caution is sometimes, and you probably see it reflected in my mannerisms, that people get so excited about the software. They tend to purchase the software based on what the software does, rather than what they actually need for the organisation. So it's really important when you're part of a HR team that's looking at buying or setting up a HR system or employing a vendor for software as a service, that you really understand your requirements first and then go and get the software that fits. Not buy the software and then figure out how it's going to fit for your organisation. That's the harder way around to do it. Also, if you know exactly what you want and what features you need and are going to use, you're not paying a higher cost for something that you don't really need. So that's something I always tend to warn any of my clients about. The final thing I just want to touch on very quickly are requirements. Again, I've already said, you need to make sure you know your requirements, but make sure those are thoroughly documented. You tend to use the requirements set for going out to tender, whether you're hosting your own licensed software or whether you're going to a SaaS provider. Those requirements need to be really well documented and at least specified to this is an absolute must. That requirement must be met or your software is not in consideration. This requirement's a nice to have, or this requirement is, we probably won't use it to start with, or it's a little bit outside of what we're likely to use for now, but it would be a nice feature to have for the future. So even if you have that really basic structure, it gives you something concrete to measure your vendors against. So just like in human resources, we're very used to measuring employee performance, the requirements document set is a way of measuring the potential performance and fit of a vendor's software. Testing is another area people tend to overlook as well. So HR tend to go, yes, we've got our system, that's great. Where's the easy button? Well, it doesn't matter whether it's software as a service or internal hosting, although internally it will actually require much more testing. At some point, somebody's got to sit there and do a walkthrough of the system. What happens when my employee does this? Where's that being stored? What does the database look like? What's the structure of the data? And equally as important, how do I get that data back out again in my reports or in my analytics? So that's one area that's quite frequently overlooked. Even if it is thought about as part of the implementation or purchasing process, people don't normally appreciate just how much resource time that does take. So don't forget that one when you're looking at any services anytime. And that actually concludes my presentation for today. As always, if you have any questions, please put those through Robin, and I'm sure we'll be able to address them. Thank you.